I know it's kind of a cliche to be the YouTuber showing off his collection, but I've held off on doing that for over 4 years of making video essays, and I feel it's necessary right now to illustrate how much the topic of this video means to me. There's the extra TV I have when I want screensavers up while I play video games on my first TV. There's the Scorpion and Sub-Zero bookends that came with my special edition of Mortal Kombat 9 over a decade ago. And here's my collectibles. And a big thing about me is I'm kind of a fickle collector. I collect on a teacher's salary and the size of my apartment reflects that, so I gotta be a little choosy and sometimes sell things I'm not necessarily anxious to be rid of, just to make space. I'm not a completionist. I have a few volumes of manga I like, I have a few figures of characters I like. Anything else? I can find it online, I can stream it without a physical copy. But then there's my complete set of all 18 volumes of Dr. Slump. Volume 1 was localized in 2005, and my neighbor I played with all the time showed it to me, telling me it was by the same author as Dragon Ball, the anime we watched and played video games based on every day. And I couldn't believe such a thing existed, that Dragon Ball had one huge guy behind it and he made another thing, and I could be up on it this early. I moved away from that suburb in Michigan not long after that, and that friend gifted me this first volume of Dr. Slump before I left for Colorado, where I live to this day, and if the slight yellowing of this 20-year-old book didn't give it away, I kept this volume forever and collected every single volume after the fact without missing a beat. I looked at the release windows of each oncoming volume, and when the time came, I begged my folks to take me to Borders or Barnes & Noble to pick up the new one, and I would just devour it that night. It was an era. It was something else. It was really special, and so's the guy who wrote them. This video's for him. Let's take a look at Dr. Slump. A while ago, I made a video about the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, wherein my thesis was, by and large, that the show resonates with so many people because it's sort of a child's power fantasy, following two characters who are either not smart or not vulnerable enough to be frightened by traditionally scary characters. I would argue nearly the same thesis could be applied to describe the appeal of Dr. Slump. But it wasn't just horror. Arale Norimaki and friends were assaulting. It was everything. Every genre, every law of physics, every establishment. And it all stemmed from the eclectic talent of the one and only Akira Toriyama. Before his heyday, Toriyama was brought up as an artist and taught to stay in the lane of cartoon characters. Every artist has to learn the basics, but Toriyama had little interest in coloring within those lines, quickly leaping to doodling creatures from his favorite movies and likenesses of real actors. Toriyama wore his love for the likes of Star Wars, Godzilla, and Alien on his sleeve, and he carried this into Dr. Slump, peppering pages with caricatures and homages. And you could chalk this up to something Toriyama did just because, but I think it's no small building block in how essential Dr. Slump is to the DNA of cartoons and anime as a whole, more so than I think a lot of people have realized. Arale is, for all intents and purposes, a Looney Tune, an impossibly powerful trickster god, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Bugs Bunny and Popeye. A story not about wondering if Arale would win or lose, but wondering just how sorry her adversary would be and how hilariously they'd be dealt with. It wasn't Shonen Jump's first comedy manga by a long shot, but it was a very specific cocktail that makes its cultural influence without peer. Arale is a brilliant character in that she taps into the key appeal of gag cartoons, the desire for power. Even though children weren't always the target audience of animated theatrical shorts, Characters like Daffy Duck, Goofy, and Woody Woodpecker are all about disrupting the status quo, something most children feel like they have no control over. And I'd wager that's still true for a lot of adults, which is no small part of why characters like these persist so universally. What lies at the core of Arale that distinguishes her is an unabashed innocence that isn't as common in the peers I just compared her to. Only built in a lab recently, she's a wide-eyed noob, hardly aware she's being mocked or bullied, and even less so that she's retaliating when she gleefully plays pro wrestling with anyone unfortunate enough to pick on her.
Boring.
I should have put the talking bits on last. There, try wiggling your arm.
Okay. Alley-oop.
Oh, wiggle. Just wiggle.
Bug eyes.
Oh, I thought I was a goner.
My chest's all flat.
Silence. A little android girl who can shatter the earth itself with her fist, leave high-speed vehicles in her dust, and despite all of that, is nearsighted.
Oh.
Complete at last.
Bleh.
Stop that. The depth of my genius frightens me. To think I've created the perfect humanoid robot.
Doctor, I can't fly.
You don't have to.
So, I can't fly. How about a tummy missile? Bazoom!
No.
Then what will I use to fight the forces of evil? Feminine charm?
Who said anything about fighting evil?
Hey, are my eyes bad?
What now?
Doctor, your face looks all goofy.
What's that? This won't do. Arale's only rival in strength would be Gachin, a baby with insect wings and laser-shooting antenna with similar strength and durability to Arale, and the ability to eat all kinds of metal and earthly matter. Arale found Gachin when Senbei's time machine brought her to the prehistoric age, assailing Gachin into the present day as a new member of her family. Also, at some point, Gachin splits into two Gachins. Why are you acting like that's weird? Arale is just as troublesome to her father, Senbei, a marvel of engineering who doesn't understand how bras work, as any typical child would be. But it's near impossible to hold any of it against her as she's driven by curiosity and playfulness. She's not a brat or a scamp waiting for a spanking. She's more so a cruel act of God the denizens of Penguin Village couldn't fight if they tried. There's no real reason anyone would want to regardless, as Arale's heart would be pure gold if she literally had one. As often as she ruins the day of local police by chasing their cruiser or bewilders her schoolmates with her Herculean feats of strength, she's making friends wherever she goes, including an early chapter where she befriends a wild bear, who was found by cruel poachers and shot, promptly Arale to deservedly send them flying over the horizon. Arale's kindness even spreading to her creator, as Senbei finds it in his own heart to use his prodigiousness in cybernetics to bring the innocent animal back to life. An act that's perhaps far-fetched to imagine of the self-centered doctor before Arale is part of his life. The cardinal rule is this: nothing can stop Arale. As early as meeting her first school friends, Yankee bad boy Tato tries to look tough in front of her, only for Arale to be immediately unimpressed and primed to display her superiority. Without a hint of malice, mind you, only out of camaraderie. From there, sworn nemesis professors, aliens, superheroes, geniuses, star athletes, and the fabric of the universe itself would follow suit and bend the knee to Arale's awesome might. Arale borrows from her inspirational ancestors in this regard, in that many of the weirdos of the week she faces are caricatures of what I can only assume is whatever Toriyama was all fired about that particular week. Just as Donald Duck clashed with silly drawings of actors in grown-up movies you didn't get the appeal of, Arale made culture as a whole gawk with her acts. When cartoon characters make fools of famous caricatures, It's sort of a playful take of that on what kids see as boring grown-up stuff. That's why the Animaniacs spoofing Friends in the 90s is so resonant to Bugs Bunny interrupting the Oscars, and by extension, to Arale dealing with big-chinned lampoons of Superman. Cartoons are counterculture at their core, and meant to exaggerate and pull the rug out from the highbrow and established. This is where Toriyama's expertise in all ways of art really comes into play. He was a master at rounded, cute cartoons and dramatically shaded, realistic drawings as well, which he used effortlessly in gags of setup and takedown. The gag of the simple-looking character turning photorealistic is a common one in anime, but I would argue Toriyama perfected it if he didn't introduce it, an essential gag to the character Senbei, Arale's bumbling creator who fancies himself a debonair man of science. Glimpses the page would display with honestly insanely good drawings of himself as he strokes his own ego, only to immediately be brought back down to earth and be reminded what manga he's in. A direct illustration of Senbei's ego and inner self, and the lovable degenerate everybody else sees. You see a similar approach taken with Tarzan, king of the jungle with a noble face and determined beady eyes, but a physique that of course pales to Arale. The more characters are around Arale, the sillier they get, like a viral case of slap happiness. A parody of Mr. Spock moves into Penguin Village, determined not to let the hijinks trouble him, only for a single day of putting up with all this nonsense to make him just another sheep in the flock. Dr. Slump is where pretension, prestige, and pedigree go to perish, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. That being said, there's one particular area where Dr. Slump was well ahead of the curve, as it showed a lot of narrative sophistication and its willingness to allow its characters to grow and change and progress. As wacky and malleable as these characters and stories are, Toriyama was eager to take his characters to new places, physically and narratively. It could be as small and seamless as the way characters change their hairstyles now and then, or something pretty significant. I was in pretty deep disbelief that the hopeless romantic Senbei managed to win over the object of his affections, Midori Yamabuki, and the two would marry, have a kid, and retain this status quo. Even if it meant introducing a whole family of new neighbors, a huge risk in series like these. Toriyama had the Chinese Sun family move in, giving everyone fresh dynamics. The patriarch Suruten Sun gave Senbei a run for his money and lecherousness, and a fun drinking buddy, while Sururin and Sukutsen acted as new love interests for Arale's friends, Tado and Akane. These weren't cousin Olivers brought in on a total whim. They were fixtures that felt like they could have easily been there all along, and served the pre-established characters and cast by adding to their dynamics, not by supplanting or taking away from them. Though maybe the most portentous development was bestowed to Dr. Masharito, the closest thing Dr. Slump had to a serialized villain, who would, with each appearance he made, upgrade his own cybernetic body, further altering his humanity and methods as his obsession with destroying Senbei and Arale drives him over the edge. This would be a fixture Toriyama would use again with the constantly shape-shifting Frieza, one of the chief traits of arguably the most influential anime villain ever. Owes the initial popularization of transforming to get more powerful to the bumbling nemesis of the perverted Dr. Slump. Mind you, I was picking these up from bookstores when I was as young as 8, so I didn't have the full context. This was something retroactively packaged and translated for the unwashed Westerners 20 years after the fact. So while I initially thought Masharito was something of a parody of Cell and Majin Buu taking on transformation after transformation, I didn't realize he was setting the trend beyond any real argument. This speaks to just how timeless Penguin Village feels, considering I didn't even fully realize I was reading a product of the 80s. The characters and design tendencies have a very retro feel, but the accoutrements and gadgets they use strike a neat balance, since more than one significant character at hand possesses immeasurable scientific prowess. There weren't clear markers like cell phones or specific cars as to what era this story occurred in, since everyone operates with Toriyama's trademark mixing pot of his favorite gadgets and everything else you've seen already, and good old-fashioned retro-core paraphernalia. Penguin Village is kind of a cross between Riverdale and Springfield, a timeless river where eras stand still, and highly technical aliens can interact with pompadour barbers that feel pulled from the Yankee-dominated 60s. And a lot of humor was mined from exploring these character dynamics. The way every dad in town wanted Miss Yamabuki, the way every superhero in town fucking hates one another. For such a zany ecosystem, Penguin Village had a certain rule set to its inhabitant that was always satisfying, closely followed, of course, by how organically the characters would develop without jarringly changing. Aside from being far from the orbit of time and era, Dr. Slump shatters challenges of localization as well. Action fight scenes are a near universal language, which is why shonen anime pretty handily integrated over to the West before a lot of the big names of manga and anime comedy. Some of Japan's most beloved characters were, for many years, gatekept from official Western release of merchandise because their works were considered too secular to a Japanese experience with pop culture. Something that never crossed my mind reading Dr. Slump, even as a babe younger than 10 years old. You'd think the sheer number of pop culture references Toriyama makes in this work would be counter to this, but he tends to throw so many things at the wall that even if something did go over my head, it was A, well drawn and executed enough to be funny anyway, and 2, usually hoisted by something I did recognize immediately after. It all comes back around to how excitable and eclectic Toriyama frequently showed himself to be, and even if I didn't know a ton about Ultraman as a young kid, I knew the characters in Dr. Slump loved him. So Toriyama loved him, so he must have been pretty cool. It wasn't just a name drop, it was an illustration of these characters who were just as geeky and creative as Toriyama, and you were just as invested in their interests and the way they manifest with these quirky caricatures and references. For all the dynamic character work I've been talking up, the only character who doesn't grow per se is Arale, literally an unaging, peak-powered android. And while some might take this as a point of angst, it's what makes Arale a perfect mascot character. The changes Dr. Slump's characters go through was Toriyama's practice for the dynamic character arcs just about everyone in Dragon Ball was given. One of that series' prime qualities being the wide range of outfits, jobs, and really thoughtful touches that convey the characters aging and changing. But Arale, being a fully robotic automaton, is the universe's one constant, even staying evergreen and spry compared to Vegeta in later crossovers. But even against heroes as prolific as Goku and Vegeta, caricatures of titanic superheroes, legendary yokai, icons of fairy tales and folklore, fellow androids, aliens, you name it, all would pale to Arale's greatest challenge, God himself. The Gachins, as it turns out, are angels, created by God as harbingers of destruction with their ability to eat all forms of matter. Arale, by plucking them out of the prehistoric age and adopting them, created a self-fulfilling time loop that saved all of existence, as God intended to destroy the world with the Gachins out of disdain for humanity's selfishness and atrocities. The final narrative foe of Dr. Slump, God, has nothing short of Armageddon on his mind when he realizes the Gachins won't fulfill their original purpose. But what halts him is the joy he observes the Gachins expressing with their family on a mere fishing trip. Not even God himself, at his most nihilistic, can bring himself to destroy such a wholesome union as the Norimaki family.
Whee! Cool! Woo, you did it! You got one!
I've never seen my angels look so happy. Perhaps this is why they forgot their mission. Perhaps I'm wasting my time. This planet will destroy itself at the rate it's going anyway. Senbei created a robot that saved the world without even meaning to, but not by beating the tar out of bad guys, just by being bottomlessly curious and kind, accepting everyone and everything around her. Arale is just so fun to play with that, yeah, two biblically accurate people eating babies won't think twice about joining her family forever. And you hear a lot about anime leaning on the power of friendship, but Arale kind of proved that can be the strongest one of all. Beyond all of her strength, beyond the fact that she may very well be the strongest fighter in fiction, the one time she truly saved all of existence was just by being really cool. And even after arcs and arcs of insanely cool fights and momentous villains, I think that's one of the most poignant arcs Toriyama ever wrote. And it's one of the things that helped Dr. Slump stick with me all this time. To collect all 18 volumes over the years it was localized, beyond any reason or promise to an old friend from when I moved away. At a certain point, it's just a really good comic, even if it does have that sentimental value to me. I hope Akira Toriyama knows, wherever he is, be it Otherworld or what have you, what a special thing he's created. This one's going out to you, champ. To the GOAT.